Welcome to Discover the Upper Cumberland, where we explore and uncover what's incredible about our region of Tennessee. I am your guide, Celeste Flatt Bennett. The Upper Cumberland has been home to many important figures throughout history that have helped shape the world. Cordell Hull was one of those very important figures. He was an instrumental part of bringing countries together to help improve the world around us, forming what is known as the United Nations. Born right here in the Upper Cumberland, in Pickett County, Cordell Hull is still being honored today.
When you come to Cordell Hull birthplace, we have a park museum that talks about the major parts of Cordell's life, like when he was Secretary of State. We have artifacts that he had when he was Secretary of State that were given to us by the Hull family. And so you kind of go through a timeline. When you first walk in, you see the later years, and then when you walk down to the log cabin, you kind of come into his younger life and his experiences as a child and what molded him to become the man he became in his later life. To become one of the greatest politicians and powerful men in history, to come from such a humble beginning, you know, it kind of gives you a new perspective of him. Cordell Hull was born here in 1871 on this property. At that time it was 12 acres and they were sharecroppers. And so they would have used all their crops and given them to their renter. And they lived here the first 4 years of Cordell's life. And then they moved down the road and bought property down there and began logging. Here today we have the cabin like they would have had it in 1871. And so people can kind of step back and feel how it would have been when Cordell lived here. We have period gardens, we have the garden down here, and then we have an herb garden on the back side of the log cabin. We're right now in the log cabin, the living quarters area, and they would have stayed in this area. This is a 1.5 story cabin, and they would have been down here and the boys would have lived upstairs. And then you can go across the road to the trailhead, and we have if you go down to Buncombe Cave, it's a 2.25 mile round trip, or you can just look at the beautiful overlook of Buncombe Cave, which is 1 3/4 miles. And it's probably one of the prettiest caves in the area. It's absolutely beautiful, and most of the time it always has running water in it, and it's nice and cool down there. So if it's 90 degrees, you walk down to the cave and you get a little bit of an air conditioner.
Before governments declared that they recognized the necessity of establishing at the earliest practicable date a general international organization based on the principle of the sovereign equality of all peace-loving states and open to membership by all such states, large and small.
And those words were the seeds of the United Nations.
Cordell Hull grew up in 1871, and that was about the time right after the Civil War. And so in this area, you had a lot of Union and Confederate people. And so Cordell had to learn how to be more diplomatic. And he worked very hard, the family did. They farmed in the summer, logged, and then in the winter months, they went to school. They were tutored when there wasn't a school, and after the school was built, they went to school, and they even went to school in Salina after they moved to Willow Grove area. And so education was very important. It was very important to the whole family themselves. Even though they were hard workers, they also believed that an education was a way to go. And so he started young into politics, and he was a U.S. representative for over 21 years. and then finally met Franklin D. Roosevelt while he was a U.S. representative and senator. And with his time with Franklin D. Roosevelt, Franklin D. really admired Cordell Hull. And so when FDR became president, he asked Cordell if he would become Secretary of State. And during his time as Secretary of State, he wrote the foundations of the United Nations. Franklin D. Roosevelt did not forget what Cordell had done, and so he nominated Cordell Hull for the Nobel Peace Prize for his work as the father of the United Nations. You know, one of the things about Cordell's childhood was that he worked in the logging industry and ran logs and would raft them to Nashville. Well, when they came to meet Stalin in Russia, Stalin was very particular, and then he called for only Cordell. And so everybody was really afraid what would happen. And Cordell came out with Stalin laughing and had a good time. Well, he was able to make that connection with Stalin because Stalin also grew up in the lumber industry, so they had something in common. And so Cordell, even though his background was very humble, it was able to give him a connection that other people were not able to get.
Today, we are living through a dark period. It is in times like this that each of us needs desperately to hold fast to the faith that is in us.